Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 5th meeting of Glendale's Charter Review Committee. Item number 1 is roll call. Committee members Durham.
Here.
Flower.
Here.
Garibian. Haratunian.
Here.
Karapetian.
Here.
Manasarian.
Here.
Megardician.
Present.
Meek.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Povolitis.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
And you.
Here.
Item number 2 is a business agenda, report of recording secretary, posting of agenda. The agenda of the June 5th, 2025 Charter Review Committee was posted on June 2nd, 2025 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. And item number 3, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. The committee may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The Charter Review Committee lead may refer the matter to staff for investigation and report. And Chair, we have 1 request from the audience and 0 callers.
All right. Please. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I just have a couple of suggestions because I've watched it online, and I had already mentioned I can't see people's names, so I don't know who's speaking. So it would be good if you at least maybe said your name before you spoke, or, you know, the cards discussed to be a little larger, or the video just zooms in on your names. Also, I don't know what the protocol is about, do you take questions from the public at all? Because I did send an email, I don't even remember, it was an email regarding when you were discussing districts and representing renters, and I did send an email with a link to the Glendale Tenants Union that people talking about what renters want appeared to have no knowledge about what renters wanted. and that they should actually talk to people who do know what renters want. I'm not just saying individually if you are a renter or if you've had experience as a renter, but there are organizations in Glendale, and nobody ever got back to me. And so I found it was very hard to listen to comments of people saying, well, you know, it's not really about this and this, but it actually is really an issue of priorities of renters are actually in opposition often to landlords. So it's not a question of having a different opinion, it's actually opposing needs. So nobody got back to me, and I think it would be great if you had something on the website of, is there a representative who would get back to you? Is there an individual you would contact? I find this, I didn't know, I don't remember who I had sent anything to, but nobody ever responded. And then I'm just interested to know, like, how you take public input. Do you take on public, besides somebody coming here? Is that's public input? Because, yeah, as we know, the public is pretty pathetic as far as showing up to meetings.
I-
But, yeah.
Obviously, we have the public comment period at this part of the meeting, which is for items that are not on the agenda. When we get to substantive items on the agenda, we'll allow further public comment on those items. And so we can hear what you have to say at those times. If there are questions you have or information you want to share between meetings, there is an email address on the website that you can send those to. And typically, if those are delivered to the staff far enough in advance of the meetings, we do get copies of those.
Yeah, nobody.
Okay.
Your name should be Beth, right?
Beth, yes.
Okay, I remember your email. I'm pretty sure everyone saw it. I personally called the Renters Association.
Oh, good, see, I
They
never knew
said
that.
they only have 25 members, and the feedback that they were providing was from that number. I've asked them for data to send us and never received anything. Just for your
Good
information.
for you, because I just actually bought my own domain name to start my own tenants union, because I did go to one meeting, which was not in English, and I had, it was like headphones, and I thought, well, that's taking up, a different time. I mean, we can at least have, a Spanish tenants union, we can have an English tenants union, because I know in the South, Glendale, there's a lot of Spanish speakers who feel very disenfranchised. That's why. Okay, goodbye. Oh, sorry. So I agree with you. It's really very sad. I do know they may have that number of members, but they also have people who are more involved when they try to get rent control on the ballot, which is what my intention will be, to get rent control on the ballot, because I think it's long overdue. So I didn't know about that. I've contacted them also, and I haven't received a response. But I did at least want to see, if somebody responded to me from my email. But thank you very much. I have heard you speak, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. Would you mind sharing your name?
Beth Brooks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Brooks.
And Chair, we have one caller on the line.
All right, please, go ahead.
Linda, you're live with the Charter Review Committee. You have 3 minutes.
If somebody responded
Okay,
to me
thank you.
from my email. But
Thank you.
Linda, are you there?
Sorry. My name is Linda Newmeyer, and I'm with the Glendale Tenants Union, and I'm calling in support of districting. Some of the reasons I support this, and many of our tenants in South Glendale support this, is we want more representation in our area so that we can become more active and more beneficial, actually, to our community. Right now, there has been a big effort to gentrify different locations in South Glendale to remove low-rent apartments from the market. This is really unfortunate now, especially. This gentrification has been particularly targeted to Mexican tenants and those of Spanish descent, and it seems that the city is turning a blind eye to this reality. The other thing that they are also turning a blind eye to, and that would not happen if we had closer representation to our council person, is the health and safety issues inside the apartments that we have in South Glendale. For example, we have big issues of black mold and flaky lead paint that has affected children in our area, and this is well documented. Let's see. The other thing I want to say is that the other positive, of course, thing that could happen if we have proper representation is this council could be more open and aware of the good community work that is done by churches and nonprofits in our community and actually celebrate them. For example, the Methodist Church on Broadway near Jackson hosts a lot of civic meetings, and that's a very good third space for groups to come together. We want to encourage people with more representation by going to districts to become more active in politics and in civic affairs. So I want to thank you for your time today, and I hope you will reconsider your hesitation to vote yes for districts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more callers?
No.
All right, that takes us to approval of minutes. These are the minutes from our meeting last month. They were in the agenda packet. Are there any changes or additions? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Motion from Mr. Meek. Is there a second?
I second motion.
Second from Linda. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention from Rachel. Oh, Liz, were you abstaining? Okay.
I wasn't here either, so
Okay,
I
so
think I should be.
3 abstentions?
Yes.
All right. Item 5, staff comments. Is this going to be about the snacks?
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll get them next time.
So, no comments?
No comments.
Okay. All right. Takes us to the main event. Item 6A, follow-up discussion on council salaries and compensation. I see a handout of slides, so I assume there's a staff report.
There is. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will provide a brief overview. A couple of items related to kind of what compensation for the council members currently. The commission asked for information regarding the entire package of salary and benefits, and then some additional items, and then Mr. Israel will discuss or address your request related to information on some of the other salary setting processes of some other agencies that were discussed at the previous meeting, and kind of give an overview of that. So let me just, is that deck up? So just in terms of what the council is currently receiving in terms of salary and benefits, as noted, the base pay is about $17,000 per year, and there is also some, and I can go through this, allowances and stipends. There's an auto allowance and a cell phone allowance. In addition, the council members receive benefits in the form of insurance, medical insurance, as well as the PERS retirement benefit, which is a different retirement benefit than for employees, but it's still based on the salary and that is received by council members. And then council members receive a housing payment, a stipend per meeting that they attend as a member of the Housing Authority. They receive a $50 per meeting stipend for a maximum of 2 Housing Authority meetings per month. The Housing Authority meets twice per month regularly, but sometimes has special meetings that occur, so sometimes there might be more than just the 2 meetings that occur per month, but at some point, the Housing Authority agreed to cap it at two meetings per month, for which they get actually a stipend, and then there's some reimbursement for other expenses that they receive. So how that kind of, I can't get this to work. Can you get next slide? Before. Can you move it? No. Oh, there we go. It worked. Well, yeah, it works. So I'm not sure if you see that, but you can certainly hopefully see it on what you have before you. So the fixed represents the salary that the council receives, so the monthly salary plus those fixed allowances, and the distinction between the one individual and the other four is that new council member came on board last year. And then in terms of what's showing as additional, that is the PERS and the medical. The variation is reflected on both, the PERS will be the same, but the what's reflected is change in the medical benefit or the medical program that a particular council member signed up for, as well as, one council member is just an individual, other council members, family, and other have, not extended family, but one would be spouse and some others have, family. So that's what's reflected in the sort of the different payments that they receive or that we pay for. These are not payments they receive. This is the cost that the city incurs for PERS and for medical for the council members. And then you see obviously the total. So that varies, but what is sort of fixed is that 17,000 per month. That's on that per year. Excuse me. That's reflected as their actual salary. Another question that was asked the last time regarding PERS for council members: are they required to be in PERS? And the council members are not required to be PERS. It's because they're in a separate program than the employees. So they have the option to choose whether to be in PERS and if they're not, then they're enrolled in what's called PARS, Public Agency Retirement System, which is more of a defined contribution system. So if they're in PARS, then they would, at the end of their service, they could either take their contributions out or they could be rolled over into another program like an IRA. Just in terms of the salaries for the clerk and the treasurer, here's the ours. So the city clerk makes roughly $133,000 annually, and the treasurer is at $149,000. And then I will turn it over to Mr. Israel to go over. Any questions on that part of it before we go over to some of the salary setting processes?
Start at the end.
Just a quick question. Those meetings, the special meetings that they go to, how long are they? Usually 2-3 hours? The ones that they get $50 per?
It depends. Sometimes they don't go very long at all.
Oh, okay.
But I would say on average, sometimes the housing authority regular meeting, a lot of times that might not have a lot on the agenda, but frequently we have housing authority special joint meetings with the city council. We had one yesterday on rent subsidies for low-income tenants, and that went for at least an hour. So
Okay.
it varies, but overall, when they have those special meetings, they typically go pretty long.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen?
I had the PERS and the PARS. Those are retirement benefits, and both of them, the council members themselves put in their contributions, or does the city?
For PERS, it's both the city and the employee, or in this case, the council member, contribute. Yeah, actually, I'm not sure about the level of contribution from the employee. When I quote, I put an employee in quotes but usually there's a contribution. It's like for like, and PARS is just a contribution from the council member from a portion of their salary. It's like tax exempt.
So with a term limit that we now have, like Mr. Najarian's been on the council for some time,
Yeah.
and other people are maybe 3 times or 2 times, do they just take out that money at the end, or is there a pension involved?
For PERS, it's a pension, and for PARS, it's, again, they take it out. Yeah, so for PERS, it's a pension based on their number of years of service and their salary at the last time that they were no longer on council, and then they're deemed retired. And they have to be on council for 5 years to vest, just like any PERS, you have to be in the system for 5 years to vest. But if they are vested, then they get a retirement that's based on that formula. But whereas PARS is just like a defined contribution system where you put in and then it
It's
appreciates.
invested and you
Yeah,
take
it's
out.
invested and then you take out at the end of it. And again, you can take it out, or you can roll it over into another plan.
So if you only get elected for 1 4-year term, you don't get it, you're not invested in PERS.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
On PARS, there's absolutely no matching at all from the city, because that's unusual for a defined contribution plan, that there's no matching.
For PARS, there's no matching.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is there any pattern to what council members have historically elected to do on the PERS versus PARs? Or is it fairly personal, individual?
I would say it's almost universally entered into PERS.
Okay.
But there's been one or two exceptions that I'm aware of.
I got one. I guess just one question on the PERS system. Is the city required to offer it? And then it's the option of the council member to pick?
Correct. As
So
long
the
as,
city, it's an obligation, a legal obligation of the city to offer the retirement system?
because that's subject to our contract with PERS. If we didn't have a contract with PERS, then we wouldn't have to offer it.
Okay.
Two questions, yeah. First one, are there any other benefits that survive past the end of the councilperson's term? So, healthcare, or anything else that they, or are they able to contribute at all to their pension or anything? Is there anything that survives past?
Other than the pension, I don't believe so. Look at Mr. Toton, if you're aware whether, yeah, maybe she's gonna, I don't know if they can.
Sorry to pepper you with HR questions.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, if I could just ask you to repeat the question.
Yeah, just trying to understand if there's any benefits that survive past their term. So either, obviously, their salary wouldn't, but is there anything that may?
Can they keep their medical or any of the other
No.
benefits once they leave office?
No, their medical, it doesn't carry with them. There's no lifetime medical. The only benefit that I could think of that carries with them after they leave office is if they vested in PERS, which takes 5 years. And then they would be able to draw down some portion of a pension based on their highest 3 consecutive year, depending on whether they were a PEPRA elected official, which was post-2013, January 2013, or a classic, which was pre-2013.
There's not going to be any classics very soon.
Actually, yeah, well, we
there's
have a
one.
few now.
Well, yes, but
Yeah.
eventually.
Correct.
So my last question, for the additional committees, boards, commissions that they may sit on that are outside of the city, that they receive compensation for, they wouldn't be eligible for those boards, be it not for their council position.
It depends.
It depends. As like, there are a number of commissions that they serve on that they could, as a member of the public, can also serve. Like right now, we have Airport Authority. All the members are from our council, but we've had non-council members serve, including Mr. Povlitis, who's served on the Airport Authority. It's not necessarily that they get it by virtue of being on council.
I guess what I'm getting at, that's a form of compensation and benefit that is available to potentially someone who is on council, although it's a separate scope of work.
It's a separate agency.
It's a separate agency. It's a child of your position here on council. So one may view that as, my total compensation, because I'm serving on that other board in the capacity of me being on this council.
Ex officio. It's going to depend wildly depending on what that other agency or board is.
It's a little esoteric, but I think just to understand the full potential benefits that one may get by being in council, it's worth considering, I think.
Rachel, please.
I have a quick question about the PERS contribution rate. So
Can you speak directly into the mic?
So I have a quick question about the PERS contribution rate from the city. So you earlier mentioned that you don't remember the percentage, but I'm wondering whether the contribution from the city is the same as the contribution the city gives to their other employees, or the rate is higher for the city council?
So maybe I can just take that one. So I think there was it depends when Mike answered the question with respect to, does the city pay for a council member's contribution in the first place? Again, it depends on when that council member was elected. If they were before 2013, the city did not contribute anything out of, the employee didn't contribute anything out of their compensation. The council member, I should say, didn't contribute anything out of their compensation towards their PERS cost. Any council member elected after January of 2013 under the Public Employee Pension Reform Act pays a portion of it. It's a minimum of an 8%, their normal share. I don't know off the top of my head if they're paying some sort of a cost share piece, but they would be paying 8% of whatever their compensation is at a minimum.
So that's how individual council member pays into PERS, right?
Correct.
My question is, the city, there's no matching from the city?
Oh,
for
no,
PERS?
the city will pick up the remainder of that particular employee's expense.
I don't think I'm following.
So let me put it this way, there's a difference between the total cost of the pension and what an employee pays towards their particular pension plan. So every single employee, and I'm going to include council at this point as defined as an employee, pays a flat amount of a minimum of 8% of their compensation towards pension. The city, however, picks up a much larger component of what's called the normal cost. So the city and the employee both pay towards it, but I can guarantee you that the city is paying more, about 2/3 more of what that cost should be, of what the employee is paying.
So a city contributes for the council member, so my question is, what the city contributes for council member is higher compared to other city employees, or
No.
are they the same?
No, it's the
across
same.
the board? Okay.
So between the two classes, it's the same within each class.
Yes, I mean, in simplest terms, yes. We would
So
have to do a
there-
side-by-side.
Yeah. Am I correct in thinking, Rachel, that your question is, are they given a preferential treatment
Kinda, yeah.
compared to a similarly situated, in terms of higher date employee?
I would have, honestly, as I sit here
Okay.
today, I'm beginning to now question certain things. I would need to do a true apples-to-apples comparison, I'd have to take a post-2013 council member's pay stub and compare it to a post-2013 employee,
Yes.
general employee's pay stub to see exactly what the difference is. It's certainly something I can get back to you, but in general terms, that's how the system works.
And then they're similar, the city's contribution.
They're similar, but I'm going to have to reserve the right to be
I
wrong.
just want to make sure that the
I
council
can get
member
back to you
a
on
lot
that.
higher, yeah, that was the whole point. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I think we're ready to continue.
So committee members, this will be a continuation of, a more in-depth discussion, continuation of your discussion from the last meeting regarding different models for compensation. One of your requests was that we bring back charter language from cities that are similarly situated to the city of Glendale. We looked at them by population. We looked at 10 cities, 10 charter cities. Mostly in Southern California, but some in Northern California, to provide you the range of salary setting options that our sister jurisdictions have established. So can we go back to the, okay. So we're gonna go geographically, I'm sorry, we're gonna go by population through the cities, so that's the order you'll find them. The first city is San Bernardino. And I'm not going to read the charter language for each one, but I'm going to give you kind of a bird's eye view of how the salaries are set in each jurisdiction, and you're welcome to read the language or ask specific questions after we go through the city. So City of San Bernardino has a charter provision, Section 305 of their charter, whereby salaries are set by ordinance upon receipt of a report and recommendation from an advisory commission. The Council is required to hold a public hearing and adopt an ordinance after having received recommendations from an appointed body that brings a report to the City Council in open session. The City of Modesto, which is the next small city after the City of San Bernardino, or next largest city after the City of San Bernardino, has a substantially similar process. So the San Bernardino process is more particularly prescribed in an ordinance. It's chapter 2.19 of the San Bernardino Municipal Code. 9 members of the advisory commission are appointed by the mayor and council. They conduct a compensation survey of city elected officials. They review the latest iteration of the government code for compensation provided to general law city elected officials. They provide recommendations to the mayor and council, and they are actually, by ordinance, encouraged to generate public participation in that discussion. They meet solely upon request for compensation review by the mayor and council. So what that means in practice is that the mayor and council could forego evaluating their salaries and don't call upon the commission to meet and gather information and report back to them.
Can I ask about that? Are you saying that the council there can just forego calling or convening the advisory commission and then still act?
No.
Okay. They have to
forego.
Okay. They forego
Considering
any
a salary adjustment.
change.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
City of Huntington Beach, next largest city, and probably most comparable to the city of Glendale by population. The Huntington Beach City Charter, Section 302, fixes the salary of city council members at $175 per month. It is flat and fixed in the charter. Next, city of Santa Rosa, population of 179,000. Like the city of Glendale, city of Santa Rosa incorporates state law, but it includes a notable exception, which is that the mayor shall receive compensation equal to 150% of the compensation of a member of the city council. Next, city of Oceanside. The city of Oceanside, incorporated with a population of 175,000, incorporates state law without exception. The city of Hayward, Section 603 of its charter, provides that, as one of the models we discussed at our last meeting, the city council can establish its compensation and change its compensation by ordinance.
That's what we're using right now in Glendale?
No. So in Glendale, we incorporate state law, and state law requires that the council take an action, an affirmative action, to effectuate a salary increase. But the limitations are prescribed by state law.
Okay.
Palmdale is similar to Lancaster in that compensation is set by ordinance, but the distinction is that the Lancaster City Charter expressly states that. The Palmdale City Charter states nothing. And thus, as a charter city, it establishes its compensation. It has the authority to establish its compensation by ordinance. City of Pomona, 152,000, Section 404 of the Charter, incorporates state law also with exceptions. It provides that the mayor's compensation shall be twice that of another council member. It provides that if state law prescribes a salary reduction, that will not affect the council members during their term of office, their existing term of office. And it provides for increases equal to the CPI. Pasadena, there was a lot of interest in Pasadena. I'm going to take a little bit more time to go through this one because it's a little bit more complex. Pasadena, our neighboring city, sets its compensation by ordinance upon input from an advisory committee. The city charter states that the committee shall be convened not less than once every 5 years. The city council members appoint the advisory committee members, who then make recommendations regarding compensation to the city council. As to the actual salary setting process, did I skip one? I think I skipped one. No, I did not. Okay. So the city charter in Pasadena states that the council can either act or not act on the commission's, the advisory commission's recommendations. So it convenes not less than once every 5 years. It makes recommendations. The council can choose not to act upon them. But if it does act upon them, it can only act up to the recommended increase without going to a vote of the electorate. If the council wants to increase compensation over that of the recommendation of the advisory commission, it has to go to a vote of the people. Additionally, any ordinance adopted upon the advisory commission's recommendation must be adopted by a supermajority vote. Once compensation has been initially established, meaning as soon as this charter amendment took action, the first time that the council set its salary, no increase in annual compensation shall be greater than 5% for each calendar year following the operative date of the most recent change. So basically, it is capping its annual increases after the initial salary setting. And no more than one ordinance establishing compensation can be adopted in any 2-year period. Other salary setting processes, we looked at 2 cities outside of the 150,000 to 250,000 population range. Those are Sacramento and Long Beach, to provide you 2 other models that our similarly sized cities are not using. The city of Sacramento employs a compensation commission with authority to establish the council salaries absent a council action. And the charter requires that this commission meet annually to review council salaries. And then in the city of Long Beach, to a prior item of discussion, the charter sets the initial salary as of 1988 and then provides for automatic adjustments based on CPI. 2 questions from the last meeting. Can the city charter be amended to provide for automatic increases in council member compensation if the maximum amount payable to council members in general law cities, for which the government code provides, is increased? And our response today, as it was last month, was most likely yes. However, such an amendment might not be advisable for the policy reasons that we discussed. Our last question from last month's meeting: have salary increases diversified the councils of other cities? We undertook this research project ambitiously, but we were not able to reach any conclusions to report back to you. The considerations were subjective, and ultimately any conclusions that we might establish wouldn't be causal in nature, so we couldn't determine either in favor or not as to whether salary increases diversified councils. That's the conclusion of our presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you may have on salary setting processes.
Does anybody have any questions? I have one. Pasadena, did I remember correctly that although they have this process with the committee, they haven't really updated their salaries since they...
So I can't speak as to how they have acted upon it, only that the charter provides that the review take place by the advisory commission at not less than twice per decade, and that even when that review does take place, the council is not required to act upon the commissions. They can essentially receive and file the advisory commission's recommendations.
I have a question regarding the city of Long Beach. When that flat rate was established, was that rate just straight salary, or was it all the other things that were included as you broke down for Glendale?
I don't know the answer to that, Committee Member Miller, and I'm happy to go back and look at it, but my educated guess without reviewing the charter language is that it would be just straight salary.
The charter says salary, so.
And most charters, as we were conducting this review process, separately prescribe how council members are reimbursed for their city-related expenses, and how they receive other compensation, for instance, for housing authority meetings. So my educated guess as we sit here would be that it's purely salary.
Thank you.
Do we know if in Long Beach it's full-time? Are they deemed full-time?
The mayor is a full-time office.
Quick question. I see that you look into a lot of cities, but have you had a chance to look into Burbank?
So Burbank, we didn't look at Burbank because although it is obviously in close geographic proximity to the city of Glendale. It's roughly half our size. So we focused on similarly sized cities. My recollection of Burbank is either that the charter is silent or the charter says that salaries are prescribed by ordinance. But my boss, having previously
My
served in-
recollection is they follow state law as well.
That's what the chart you gave us.
Perhaps for the benefit of people who weren't here, could we just refresh everybody how state law works?
Sure. Let me pull my notes here. What? Do I need a second? Not really. I have it right here. Oh, go ahead. Then go ahead.
I'm just trying to buy him some time. He doesn't
Yeah.
know how to read this. I did have a final response to the question that you asked a few moments ago. The information I provided was accurate. I just checked with our payroll supervisor. Council members and employees pay the same rate. So there is no additional benefit.
So with respect to the state law, generally it's a schedule based on the population range that the city's in. Our range is 150 to 250,000. The current maximum salary that the city council can establish, and our charter, again, incorporates this provision. The maximum amount currently would be $2,200 per month. And the city can adjust that salary by 5% per year. So it can do it every year, it can adjust it, or every 2 years. And the other provision of state law is that no adjustment can be made during unless at least one council member has started a new term. So if the council, for example, to adopt an ordinance increasing the salary to what is permitted under state law today, or to do one of those 5% increases, it couldn't take effect until the earliest of the June 2026 election. And the last time we made an adjustment back in 2013, I believe that's how it was done. The adjustment was made, and then it took effect after the next election.
All right, so here we are. If there's no more questions at the moment, I would like to invite the public to give their thoughts.
We have one request from the audience.
I'm interested in the research that you did that was inconclusive about diversifying city councils based upon salary. I'd like a copy of that, if you have it. I don't know what kind of research that was. Was that just looking at data?
We haven't received anything
formalize
written.
anything? No.
No.
There's nothing. There's no research to look at.
All we've received is the oral report.
Okay, is there a transcript of the oral report?
The meeting video and minutes will reflect the
Okay,
the
no,
oral
because
report.
I'm just wondering if, it's very hard to prove causation for anything, but you can prove correlation. So I'm assuming there has to be some correlation, because just even using common sense, if you increase salaries so that people who need to pay mortgages and rent could actually have this as an actual job, you would diversify, at least you would have renters on the board. I mean, because the people who are on the city council now don't need the money. They don't need that job. If you actually tie the salary to private compensation, on average in the city of Glendale, which I think is like $80-something thousand per 3-person household, you actually would get people for whom I think would represent the rest of the city. I know that you're looking at minutia now, and so I'm not involved in the charter at all, and I'm looking at the macro level, that I think you do need to diversify the city council. I think it's also important to sort of not even look at what's been done and sort of start fresh and bold and say, what do you need a city council member to do? How many hours should they be putting in? Because to make proper decisions, they should be working full-time. To make proper decisions. They should definitely have staff. They shouldn't rely on one person, which is typically the city manager, as the funnel, who funnels everything to them. As far as I could tell, I may be wrong. I don't think that's good either. There's a lot of things I don't think that are good, but I think that the salary is very, very important. I think that you should treat it as a full-time job, and it should have compensation relative to what a private employee would be paid, between $60,000 to $80,000. And I think you'll get people on. I think committees should be paid too. I don't think you should be here as volunteers. I'm not of that opinion at all. I think you should be paid for your time. Everybody who does anything for government should be paid for their time. It's not about being altruistic or not. I think your time is valuable. So I think that's the bigger issue, not the salary, PERS, not the minutia. The bigger issue is be bold and decide what is a city council member there for? What should they be doing and who should they represent? They shouldn't just represent people who don't need that job. And that's who they are now. And that's who most government employees are. And that should change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other speakers?
No.
All right.
Mr. Chair, may I offer one point of clarification?
Sure.
I couldn't shake from a committee member's question, I couldn't shake from my mind the research conducted regarding salary setting processes, and just took a quick look at the Burbank City Charter, and it does say that that compensation is established by ordinance and caps that compensation at what state law would provide to general law cities of a similar size.
Okay. Sorry, I shouldn't get caught up in what Burbank's doing. All right. All right. This is our time. This is our discussion. Would anybody like to kick it off? First of all, I would like to recognize Linda for providing that outline that she sent around. I don't know if everybody got a chance to look at it. I thought it was a fairly nice little summary of some of our different options. If it's something that we even want to do, do we want to? Do we think that the charter needs to be adjusted on this issue at all? And if it does need to be adjusted, in our opinion, do we have an idea of how? I will just kick things off by saying something I told Carl when I sat down is like, I'm not even sure if I have a strong view on this one. Like I really, like, this is one where I can really see the arguments on both sides. The arguments that we got from the audience today, I see merit in them. I also see merits in other opinions that have been expressed that, public service should be more of a part-time job. So, putting the cards on the table, I'm not sure where I stand on this question, so I'm really looking forward to hearing from those who have some views on this.
I'll go second. So the most interesting piece of information that I took away from the presentation was the range of total compensation, total benefits, anywhere from $53,000 to roughly $84,000, depending on how long you've been and the circumstances particular to that council person. So when you when we focus on the salary component alone, it doesn't paint the full picture, and really this third slide for me is what paints the full picture in terms of the benefits that one receives, not to mention anything outside of the council on other boards that they may sit on. So, in terms of the amounts, the last thing I'll just add is that we talked about this at the last meeting, that currently the ordinance allows council to adjust their salaries should they feel it needs to be adjusted up to the amount stipulated in by the state. So that the fact that it hasn't happened since 2013, I think, means presumably they're happy with the way the salary is, or they don't want to take up the matter. It's not material enough for them to take it up because they would be capped at theoretically $2,500 anyways. So I'm kind of with you, Chair Flower, except maybe I think the system is generally working, but I'm looking forward to hearing everyone else's comments.
Linda.
I think one of the reasons that they might not have done this was because it's self-serving, and maybe that's just holding them back. That's the only, after I was reading all this and listening to the presentation, that's the main thought in my mind, that I keep thinking why they haven't done it, and maybe they don't need it, maybe it was not important, maybe this service is not monetary to them, but at the same time, maybe I wouldn't feel good to go and increase my salary somewhere myself. So that's my thought.
I have a question.
Please, Liz.
Has there been any discussion at all, probably the staff would know, in the past, by the council regarding this? I mean, like, has there been a point of discussions lately, or can you give us a history?
I can give, and I think we briefly mentioned this, but the only real discussion that's occurred was in 2015 when we had that ballot measure, Measure C, which would have allowed the council to set salary by ordinance. And there were a number of measures, and that was one of them, and they all failed, and that was one of, and, you know, again, I think some folks, the after action, you know, discussion that we heard, just sort of, and there was no actual report on it, but just what people were talking about, it felt like, well, that's giving the council the ultimate authority to just set their salary with no limitation. You know, whether that's a fox guard in the henhouse type of situation, I think that was how some folks perceived it. So this, you know, and there really hasn't been any much discussion about it until the council started talking about the charter again in 2023.
Thank you.
And the only thing I will mention, that the council, when they did discuss it, they discussed the options, and we had given you the report from 2023, and there was some support for the option of tying the mayor's salary to the area median income and then having the council at 80% of that. It wasn't unanimous, but there was, I think the majority of the council members seemed to overall be supportive of that. But again, that was, council very much wants to hear the thoughts and opinions of this committee on that before moving forward.
Thank you.
Stephen?
It was intriguing to me about the linking the salaries to a benchmark, which is, what happens if the salary in the city, the median salary in the city goes down? Will their compensation go down? Or would it be just held where it was? Would it fluctuate, basically?
Generally, wouldn't, but.
It would depend on how the provision is written. My understanding is, you know, the model that I just suggested where 100% of AMI, and that was based on Santa Barbara's, and my understanding is it goes however it goes. I mean, the reality is it's very unlikely that area median income goes down. It fluctuates, it stagnates for some time, but we've rarely seen it go down in any appreciable manner. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, it will be based on whatever language the voters ultimately approve.
It's going to follow the
But
larger regional trend.
I think the issue with any concept like that is, how you're therefore, you could theoretically be treating council people different than other city employees in terms of how their compensation is adjusted. So I think someone who's a full-time lineman at GWP has a very different job description, very different obligation to the city than someone who's elected to council. So I don't.
They get paid a lot more.
They also do a lot more.
Yeah.
So
They take a different risk.
It kind of in a free market, that's kind of how it works.
But the council does see some risk.
They do have some, but they're not grabbing 12.5 kilovolt lions.
Nobody sings songs about them.
I have two comments, if I may.
Sorry, Denise, thank you.
So aside, regardless of this commission making recommendations to raise salary or not, is it also part of our scope? Can we go back to council with recommendations on how to set their salary in the future?
Well,
given that it's not been done for 10 years?
I think our bailiwick here is to look at the charter and say, because right now they have the option that's under the charter, they could go and adjust it pursuant to state law. Do we want to provide for a different mechanism, either that directly sets it or creates a process for them to set it in a different manner? Because obviously they, at least from what I've seen, they seem reluctant to use the method available to them because there seems to be a perception that there's a political risk in doing so. Although it keeps coming up, so there's probably a real desire to see it increase, and there is some outside of these specific council people, there are people who believe that increasing the salary is actually necessary to attract more people in, which would require a different process, I think.
And then.
That's charter driven.
Thank you for that. And then my second question, which is to Commissioner Linda Megaderchian. Thank you so much, first off, for providing these notes. Can you just tie in where, did you apply state law to any of these scenarios? And can you draw me to that?
Actually, not really. I just looked up different options that were out there. Some of them, for example, no increase, I believe no more than 10% increase is part of it, if I recall correctly. So there can't be more than 10% increase in their salaries on a yearly basis. I don't remember specifically looking into it, honestly. If it's, because what we have right now follows state law, so we're supposed to not to break it, but offer some other solution. So that was my intent when I was looking at it.
So Chair Flower, in the interest of advancing the discussion, if you wanted to, I don't know. It seems to me, if you're looking for some consensus or thoughts, I think our ordinance starts with the state law, and then in terms of discussing the process, there are things in other cities that I think, we could open up for discussion perhaps.
Yeah. Do you have a preference amongst those options?
So, yes, I do like the way that Pasadena does it. I also, there's an element of looking at, let's go back to, well, I can start with where I wouldn't go. I would throw out Hayward, and I would throw out Huntington Beach. I just don't think they apply.
Agreed on Huntington Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I might, so we know that the common theme across all of these is it's set in ordinance. So that would be a low. We know that the majority of these have a compensation group that reviews this. And so that might be one of our recommendations in terms of where we go. How we, in terms of the benchmarking or in terms of a flat rate, I happen to be with with Commissioner Karapetian in looking that the third slide was very telling in terms of the total compensation. That being said, I do think that our council has not raised their salary in 10 years. That might be something that we go back and recommend for them to do and give parameters around it. But in terms of coming back with a flat rate or a index related to price of living, I would need more. I would need to hear from other commissioners before I could really feel comfortable going there. Thank you.
I have a question about that chart in the second slide. You said that second column represents benefits, medical, and PERS. What's the largest piece of that? Roughly. Is it mostly medical? Is it, because that would explain the variation.
The variation's based on the medical,
Yeah.
right?
That's what I was gonna say.
But I'm not sure what the height, do you think of those numbers on that slide?
I mean, I can't say with certainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I imagine most of us are covered by some health plan or another. And, if you ask me how much I make, I don't calculate how much that's worth. It's part of my job. And that seems to be right now what the main benefit that they have this. But, we're all hopefully lucky enough to have healthcare like that. So it doesn't really factor in as much to me because it's not the kind of thing that is necessarily driving it for a lot of people.
In terms
and it
of-
is going to vary. The amount, if you get hung up on the amount, then they're all getting the same benefit option. If you have a family, you get a larger benefit. If you're single or just married with no kids, you get slightly different benefit. It looks like they're getting drastic amount, but they're getting the same benefit, at least the way we all realize it in our own lives.
I think just one thing, committee member Miller pointed out, that's a little slip there. Over the last 10 years, the base salary, the compensation may not have increased, has not increased, but the other benefits in terms of health care and retirement, the net benefit has increased, right? Because healthcare costs are going up 10% a year.
Yeah, well, but that's for everybody.
I understand
That's
that, but my
everybody.
point is that, we're solely seem to be focused on compensation, and we shouldn't even be focused on the number, because we should be focused on the process. But the other benefits, you gotta look at the whole package, and the other benefits, the other side of that coin, has seen significant increases in terms of the benefits that a council person gets.
I would just say that, and folks, and we deal with this when we deal with employees, when negotiating things, the benefit may stay the same. It's the cost of the organization that has gone up. Not to be discounted, but whether you're a council member or you're an employee, you're looking at it as things have stayed the same. So I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, well, the way my response would be that the benefit is not in a vacuum. The benefit is in your alternatives. So if the alternative was to procure healthcare through a private, either employer or privately, it would cost significantly more. Therefore, the benefit that you're getting as a public employee is better.
And it's part of the compensation package.
Yeah,
if you will. It's like-
and yeah, that's a big deal.
It's not eliminated from it, because there are some jobs where you would not have that benefit. So sometimes people will take a different salary because the benefit package is significantly better depending on their individual needs.
And do public employees or in the city of Glendale, what percentage of their monthly healthcare premium is covered?
It depends on which plan they choose and also their family size. It's a variable factor. John can probably answer better.
Yeah, again, it depends on your compensation to begin with. But essentially, the way it works is depending on which bargaining group you're with, there's a portion of your own medical expense that you pick up, and then the city pays the rest. I will say the city pays the vast majority of it.
So is it single digits percentage that the employee pays, or is it like more than 10%, less than 10%? More than
No, it would be a dollar amount, but that translates into a percentage based on what it compares to in terms of your salary.
I guess what I'm trying to drive at is we need to understand that council people, whoever runs for council, they're looking at their other opportunities to dedicate part of their day. A big part of it is trying to give back to the community, trying to be a part of the community and shape the community, which I don't know how you put a dollar figure on that. Some of these parts are very discreet, and you can put a dollar figure on it. So if my alternative is to spend the extra 20, 30 hours working and not getting great health care, but I get really great health care if I run, that is something that should be considered.
Is the council members' health benefit package, how is that negotiated since they're not in a bargaining unit?
They don't negotiate their own
Right,
package,
so
but we
how do-
we always include those 5 council members as part of the executive
Okay.
class and comp package, so they will get exactly what the executive group gets.
Okay.
And do they pay for a portion of it, or do they just get that as part of their position?
Oh, gosh, had I known you guys were going to talk about the details of medical
Well,
tonight.
I actually want to go
and
higher up
pensions.
in the mix, but it's like,
I don't believe, so unlike PERS, I don't believe that council members pay for their medical coverage.
Can I make a suggestion? The fact that we are getting into the weeds like this, and we could probably talk about this for a year, to me, at least lends itself to the idea to an advisory commission on this topic. Because you could have a group of people who get together once every 5 years, and you could get it staffed by the HR department, come in and answer all these questions, to really think about, what is the compensation. You could do a class, I don't know if there's a class and comp study, something like that, which you do for employees every so often to make sure that you're staying with market. And then that's presented to the council, and the council can say yes or no. And if you want to make it a little bit harder for them, impose a supermajority requirement. That's just a thought.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you. I wanted to thank Committee Member Mugadichan for doing this. And I was looking at the alternatives, and that's exactly what I'm coming up with as the Compensation Commission, because there's so much details that are involved that we're not aware of, that we should be aware of, and we're not in a position right now to go into the details of really what the numbers are. But the idea of having a body that gives their time every 5 years is very appealing to me. So the more I see what the alternatives are, I think I'm feeling very strongly about that, so. you know.
Carl was going to say something, so I'm going to hold on.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I kind of want to back up, because I think some of this might matter, and I think a couple of us weighed in last time. I guess I'm a little old-fashioned. I think serving on council is, part of it is service. I don't see it in this city as a full-time job. That's at least where I'm starting from. I know you can make it a full-time job, but I don't think it necessarily should be a full-time job. We run a council manager form of government, which means the city manager doing their job should be doing the administrative work for the city. So the day-to-day things should be handled there. If that's not being handled there, then there's a different issue within the governance of the city we need to deal with, not necessarily the council. The council, as I see it, is more the policy board that is really providing direction to the city manager to go forward and do, if you will, the day-to-day executive functions of the city. I don't think that's necessarily a full-time job. That being said, I'm going to go $17,000 a year is probably not what we ought to be compensating our council members for their time. And I know it's going to be difficult for them to raise it because they have the ability to basically, in essence, double it, and they have not done that. But I don't know a way out of the political thing, because ultimately the city council is the governing authority of the city, and whether you do it by ordinance, they're going to have to pass the ordinance. They're going to have to approve somebody's recommendation. Now moving back to where I think Elizabeth was, Denise was, because the charter I look at it as a process. Talking about a specific number, I don't think gets us far. I could say something is probably too low, and I might say something is too high, but the process, right now, we default to state law, which basically says city council has to choose to do that. And that would give them, I don't know, what, $2,500 a month plus or minus if I do the math. Just to kind of put some things, because area median income is tossed in there, and I'm not really a numbers person, but I did take a look at the numbers. So looking at a one-person household, I think the number in the staff report that was shared was $68,750. If you were to pay that average compensation for what I'm going to say is part-time, and that's probably a full-time compensation for somebody in a household, that comes out to about $5,730 a month. So just because we got all this in monthly, and then when we talk about area median income, we talk about a year. So then when I start comparing that, and if you go to the four-person household, it goes up to $81, $83, $84 a month. That puts us in the higher end of most of the cities that we're looking at. So but I also look at a charter. It's kind of like a constitution. Maybe it's not so much empowerment as it is a check on government power. It's designed to make sure that government can't go do everything that it wants, that it reserves some rights back to us, the people. And so I probably come down here. One is, as I said, I will say I think that's too low. Two is, if I were looking at a charter amendment, I think the process, if we wanted to step away from state law, I'm kind of coming around to, like, every 5 years, a commission has to review it. Council then has to look at that and decide whether or not it wants to take action. Automatic adjustments, they make it easy if you're on the receiving end, but when you start looking at cities, they go through financial difficulties. At times, there are cutbacks. Employees are asked to take cutbacks. There are times when I think leaders need to set the example, and so a quote-unquote, oh, gee, I got to take the raise is not the thing to do that. But I think a commission that looks at it, the ability to, then recommend it to council to decide whether or not they want to accept it, and then maybe a max in the charter that says it shall not exceed this particular. I don't want to go with a number, but I'm going to pick on AMI for just a moment. But whatever you do in the compensation, you cannot exceed this particular number. Then protects the rest of us as sort of taxpayers, that people just don't go by ordinance and go, hey, we're changing this to full time, without going back to the community as a whole, saying that's the vote. The alternative also behind that is, if council doesn't want to vote for their own compensation, I guess you could put it out to the community saying, here's the recommendation from the commission, do you approve it? So I'm just going to throw that mess right in the middle and see if that generates comment or two.
Alan?
I'm looking at it from a little bit different lens. I mean, if we recommended a commission, I wouldn't want the commission just to be, oh, what are other cities doing? How much are they paying? Because I think it would have to also be based on pay for performance. How is the council performing? Are they really serving the community? There are a lot of people right now that don't feel our current council is. Also, the city's in fiscal imbalance. I don't know if anyone else on the committee watched the first budget study session on May 8th. Mr. Toktaglian led that presentation. Ms. Brooks attended it. I watched it. We're in fiscal imbalance. There's no sign that the city is going to emerge from this fiscal imbalance. Our revenues are lagging. Our expenditures are rising much more rapidly. There aren't many alternate revenue sources to be tapped to try to fill the void. And the 5-year forecast, and Mr. Toktaglian can correct me because I'm talking off the top of my head from memory, but I think by the 4th year, we pretty well exhausted the general fund reserve. And by the 5th year, we would have exhausted and be out of money. Now, those are just projections, but that's the trend. And in my opinion, we have a current city council, it's not all the members, but who are really spending money, non-essential money, on non-vital Glendale, improvements or issues, such as the most notorious one is the brand demonstration project that we wasted $1 million on. $1 million when this year we've managed to reduce our deficit from 14 million to 5 million with departments looking where they can cut, but we're still running a $5 million deficit. I mean, that's 1 million out of the 5. And I could cite other $1 million examples, such as hiring a consultant to.
Alan, if I'm sorry to interrupt, but rather than go into criticisms of what's going on in the current council, we're supposed to take a step outside of the day-to-day politics, I think, and think about the process. Your point is well taken that there are times when council may be judged by poor performance and not meriting an increase, and that's something that could be taken into account. But I don't want our meetings to become a rehash of criticisms about.
I understand, but let me just make one comment. I'm not sure that if the charter was to be changed, that and it went on the ballot, I think voters are going to be judging that ballot measure and that proposal based on the current council. They're not going to be thinking ahead about, oh, maybe if we increase the salaries, we'll get better council decisions. That may be true, but that's speculation.
I think if I could just add, the current process allows for the council to adjust their salaries should they see fit. I personally would love to see the debate from the dais over whether there's merit to adjusting salaries. I mean, what better process than to have the people make the case to the public why their salaries need to be adjusted, as opposed to shifting it to a commission who is going to be appointed through some process which we haven't even defined yet. And that commission is going to make a recommendation. Let those folks debate it and make the case to the public. And whatever their decision is, if it's an increase or a decrease, send out a little postcard to all the residents and all the GWP payers so that they understand what the decision was. I don't see why the current process, as I hear people talk about it and think about it, how is it broken?
So, Chair Flower, if respectfully, Commissioner Karapetian, that's the first time we've diverted directly opposite. I can't get behind that, but here's why. I do think on our notes on page 5, I'll back up what I'm stating, and I do believe I know where Commissioner Durham was going, because if we look at the process, I do think we have a process in place. And if you look at page 5, where it talks about what's currently in the charter, page 5 of the very lengthy notes where staff went to all this effort to really walk us through it, the So if you look at what happened in 2005, the council has twice amended the council's salary since 2005. They took effect in 2007 and 2013 respectfully. So that personally tells me, I don't, just from a number standpoint, it's 2025, there's been no salary increase. They have a way to do it, they've not done it. So something's broken in the process. And does that process indicate, like, for example, I would like to see a compensation committee. I would like it to be tied to performance. I would like it to include state law. I wouldn't like us to just say back to, I would like to give more directive to council in those recommendations around an advisory committee for them to choose to do or not, but to give them more direction that says, we want it tied to state law, we want it tied to performance, we want it, and then let them go where they may with it, and then if it goes on the ballot, that's due process to me. That's.
So my thoughts on that are, a council person's performance is ultimately judged by the public, whether they're reelected. The problem is we're blurring lines. This isn't a job that you hire for. It's not an open market. If someone doesn't show up to work on time or doesn't perform, you can't write them up, and you can't give them a 90-day notice, and you can't ask them to leave, ultimately. So I don't think we can.
Let me just further add flavor if I can. So we could also put a parameter in there that if the city has a budget deficit, there would not be a salary increase. We can give guidance around that to help council to have, obviously, the state law is not enough for them to just, so if we provided more input on guidance that they might look at, 10 criteria, check the box. And if the city has a budget deficit, then that would be one criteria where they wouldn't raise salary. That's what I mean by tied to performance.
I'll say one last thing, and then I'll let Lilith and Rachel. The other thing that I think is maybe worth considering, rather than having a commission that meets every 5 years, you can maybe require via charter that the council every 5 years take up the matter and deliberate and actually make a decision. So. Decide to increase it, decide to decrease it, decide to make no change. Because our concern is that nobody has talked about it since 2013, well then require them to talk about it.
Sorry, I have a strong response, but it's not my turn.
So I have different thoughts on forming an advisory committee, and personally, I am against it. Because now we have 5-member council. If we agree to increase maybe 7, 9, so for 9 or less than 10 people, we have to spend time to pick the people to be on the committee. And based on Pasadena ordinance, the committee member is chosen by, recommended or chosen by a city council member. So there has to be there could be some quid pro quo between them. And if what other people like us who has nothing to do with city performance, why would I volunteer on a committee to set city council's salary? I think that's not very time well spent as a citizen. And then to support the meeting, all city staff has to find time, place, record, prepare a meeting, do the research. We spend so much public resources for 10 people. I don't think that's a good use of public resources. So I don't think that is a good choice. And at the same time, I think the current version is not good enough because we all know that it's really hard to talk about your own salary. So I think there has to be a kind of automatic increase, but I think that automatic increase has to be tied to the city employees. So I know city employees are represented by different unions. So can we maybe tie their increase to the average percentage of each union increase? So there, let's say there are 5 unions. Some union got 2%, some union got 5%, some union got 0. Can we average out? And then, the city council member gets the average amount of increase, every 4 or 5 years. That way, everything's automated, each union has different way to like negotiate their salary. So the commission, the city council will not get too much increase or too low increase. They'll just get average based on the city employees. And it's automatic. It doesn't take any much electricity or public resources.
Lilith?
Just a few comments. I think all of us have been thinking about this, the very low number and the abstinence of not trying to even people talking about their salaries. I think we also know from personal experience, and I'm not saying they haven't thought about it, but if all of us know that we do something and we deserve an increase, we always try to talk to our people and bosses to have that, if you have the option. I don't think the process is broken or something is missing, but maybe there is, if there is a fear of bringing this up, the increase, then why is there a fear that maybe the public will be against it? And if there isn't, I agree with Commissioner Karapetian that maybe they can bring up the issue that we are serving and there is a law that can help us to increase, and it's been a while that we haven't. I don't think anybody doesn't want to value their time, but just to open the conversation when there is a law that allows them to have. And I'm not sure how much the increase should be or the amount, but I think it can be, as you said, conversation with the public and saying that we deserve this, and what do you think, how much it should be. So I have a feeling, I don't know, there has been a reason that for so many years this option hasn't brought up. I don't think it's the law or the charter that's the part that is not allowing to do it. But that's just my own thoughts.
Alan?
I'd like to thank Commissioner Miller for crystallizing my thoughts, which I apologize if they were somewhat rambling. To summarize, I don't like the optics of this committee making any recommendation to substantially increase city council salaries at a time when the city itself, on May 8th, just released a 5-year forecast of increasing deficits, and by year 5, the city will be broke. Now, those projections may change as the economy changes. They might be worse, they might be better, but I don't think the optics are good. And we don't have to lay fault on the council, but I liked Commissioner Miller's suggestion that council shouldn't be getting increases when the city's running huge budget deficits and basically going broke.
I was going to give Ms. Miller a chance to respond since she was mentioned.
Well, just one thing in terms of moving the conversation forward from the other comments with this group. I'm not convinced that we need an advisory committee, so I just went there because I'm very process focused. And as part of that process, if we even, so let's take the advisory committee out for all the good reasons you raised, Commissioner Yu, and but what's currently in place is not working. It's not working, and so, and by not working, what I mean is council's not acting on it, and we could certainly say, well, that's on them, but I think we could also possibly look at all of this evidence that's been given to us and give them some criteria by which to speak to the public about the salary increase. And then the last thing that I just want to comment on as it related to Commissioner Karapetian, where to clarify, the element where I thought we disagree is, I don't, with a budget deficit, I mean, it's hard for me to make this comment without seeing our current council and the current public and the way the interactions take place. But I really don't want the city time spent on opening this up at council. That's why I'm more, only because it could go on, and we have a budget deficit. And I'd like to hear council talk about that. And I'd like to hear them talk about the electric rates and in detail. I know they're doing that. That's not intended to be a criticism at all. I know they're doing that, but some of these things that are about mayoral selection or about council or about districts, which are all important, are also taking up very significant amount of times when we have a budget deficit. So that's my reason for wanting to give a path forward with a process outside of council to really address this very important thing. I mean, you know, there hasn't been an increase for 10 years. There should be. Lastly, we can recommend back to council to follow the ordinance as stated, or we can give them some more criteria by which to have a very astute discussion and then to present it to the public. That's all I'm saying.
Since Committee Member Miller mentioned, I think I can get behind the notion of requiring council every 5 years. I think I can get behind the idea of having council take up the issue every 5 years or something thereabouts. Because we're coming at this from a place, some of us are coming at this from a place that it hasn't changed since 2013, therefore it's broken. I don't have that assumption. I did maybe a week ago, and as I've thought about it and reviewed it more, I'm coming at now from a place that they have the means to address compensation. People are not coming up at city council demanding that council members get paid more. Council members who, I come from a place where I assume that they're not shy people, and they spend all kinds of time talking about all kinds of things at council. And if this was important, I presume they would bring it up. So I think the only thing I can get behind is we can require that they take up the issue every 5 years and have an affirmative go up, go down, no change, whatever. But other than that, I don't think adding another committee or infrastructure and it is really the right thing to do.
All right. If nobody minds, I'd like to weigh in a couple points. One, just to mention that the council has brought it up. They brought it up as recently as this last staff report back in '23. The general issue. We can say that there's a way forward, they can do it if they want, but that is to, in my opinion, put our heads in the sand and ignore the fact that there is a political issue here. Now, Carl said, our charter is kind of like a constitution. I'll disagree. It's exactly like a constitution. It's there to solve political problems. And the way in which we typically do that in this country is with process, and process is important. Dear Lord, we need more of it now. The fact that, you know, part of the process that we've been kind of talking about is this idea of an advisory committee. That does not completely solve the political problem, but it creates an avenue for the discussion to get out of the council meeting, for people to dig in the weeds and to have some sort of quasi-independent body weigh in on that fact every 5 years. And, you know, you can suggest that there's some sort of, they can stack the committee and there's quid pro quo, but, you know, I mean, the council appoints us. The council appointed us. I didn't get anything for it. You know, it's the same concept. It's just single purpose every 5 years, weighing in like us in good faith, digging into the facts, spending some time to think about it and make a recommendation. Now, it doesn't, we can give a lot of structure to it, a little bit of structure to it, but just that extra bit of process takes it out of the, you know, the pit of politics in the council chamber, where they do have other things to deal with, and allows a group of citizens to deal with it and get into the facts in the way in which the entire electorate can't. They just say yes, no, and if they're in a bad mood, they say no. And nobody's ever gotten elected saying, I'm gonna, you know, elect me and I'm gonna raise my pay. So, you know, I do think that, you know, leaving aside what you think about the current council members, if we're going to elect our fellow citizens to act on our behalf and, you know, lead the city, I think they deserve a fair process for determination of how much they get compensated for that. And if the process is either going to be the council has to stand up and make that decision themselves without any sort of political backing, or tossing it to the electorate every time, they're never going to get paid. And some people will never go near it because it's just not worth it. You know, it's more than I thought I was going to say. So. We have not heard from you this evening, and I was going to call you earlier.
You got excited. To take that even further, I'll throw out an unpopular one. I kind of like average median income because it really takes it out of the council, I think, in this way that the council deciding its own salary is just filled with so many things. I think the reason that each time they don't vote on it, and I would anticipate they turn down a recommendation from an advisory council, is it doesn't behoove them politically, and I think also they just don't need the money. I think as we talk about this kind of ambitious idea of changing the makeup of the council and introducing accessibility and diversity in the council that we hit so hard with districts and mayor, I think this is so much more direct in doing it. And you want to create a system in which a school teacher could theoretically leave their job and maybe go on council. And so for that, I think tying it to a median income so that they could afford a one-bedroom apartment, 80% of median income like Santa Barbara does, something like that is just a really clean, easy way to set it up outside of the current council, outside of their vote, to give more people access to the council we kind of want, that more people could do it. So that's kind of a really clean, simple idea that I saw that kind of resonated with me when I first read it.
So my concern with the median income, tying with the median income is that, let's say, City of Beverly Hills, probably their median income is a lot higher than us. And if you tie council salary to that, they'll get paid a lot more than city council in Glendale. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what they do is a lot more complex, require more time than council members in Glendale does. Just because the city median income is higher, I don't think that justifies paying them higher salaries. So that's my.
It's the statistics, not but just the city. It's the area.
So,
Typically, area median income is based on the area median income for LA County.
Okay, so I want to go back to the committee idea. So I respect why Chair likes that idea, but I see as a use of public resources, not only the person, like people like citizens like us attending and volunteering for this committee, there's a resources that needs to pay from the city, space, time, recording, minute, like research. I don't think that's a good use of public resources. And personally, I'm against spending any public resources to just set a committee, city council member's salary. And I'm even against having them prove to the public that how much I should get paid. Because for that presentation, they need to spend their time to be prepared for that presentation. I'm sure they have a lot of other things to do and spend their time on to decide the city matter. So in that regards, I think it's best way is to automate the process. And one way is to tie to the city employee. And I like the Alan's idea. When there's a deficit, they should get zero or the minimum raise. And one way to ensure that is to tie to the city employee's salary. Because I'm a state employee, I generally know how the salary increase negotiations work. When state is in deficit, Cal HR does everything they can do not to give us any raise because the state doesn't have money. So if we tie the council member salary to the raise the city employees get, we kind of, that consideration already into that negotiation because city is not going to give a raise to their employee when the city is in deficit. So, and then, like I mentioned, the city council members, 5, maximum less than 10. Why do you want to spend so much time and resources to decide 10 people's salary? So to that point, I think we should make it simple, automated, tied to the city's general the finances, and the specifics may differ, but that's my suggestion.
So I think we have committees, we have commissioners who meet 4 times a year or less, if I'm correct. And we have the CDBG grant committee that they basically come together once a year. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So I don't think having an additional committee is waste of resources. I think it gives us a way, gives people a way to be part of this process, and it increases the transparency in the government. So that being said, I also think there should be an aspect of median income in the salary increase, because if the economy is bad, if the city is basically in debt or going in debt, basically we don't want to increase the salary. So that part I agree with everyone who mentioned that. However, I'm also leaning forward to having a commission make this decision with possibly a few clause for conditions that they cannot basically overrule.
Could I make a suggestion? As I'm listening to this, maybe one of the ways to depoliticize it is to stagger the effects of the decision in time. So for example, if we require that the council take up this issue every 5 years, and whatever decision they make goes into effect 3 or 4 years from the date they make the decision. That way, they don't have any, they're focused on the position and not the individual, right? The decision is, should this position get a higher compensation or a lower compensation or no change? Until when?
I think it is the next election.
Okay, so we've already depoliticized it, right? Well, the current process.
For 2 or 3 of them. Because
Okay.
not everybody, because it would be next election, not everybody stands election every
So that
2-year
seems
cycle.
to, again, go back to my scratching my head, but what's wrong then? I mean, if they really feel strongly that it needs to be adjusted one way or the other, why haven't they discussed it?
Sorry. Because the politics are bad.
Okay, so if the
Nobody wants to have to run against, as an incumbent, against somebody who can stand up and say, and they voted to raise their salary without any context to that attack. And you know, I just think that I refuse to ignore the political realities of the difficult spot that it is for somebody to have to vote on their own salary increase, which is why I like the idea of an advisory commission that actually does the work conscientiously. I mean, I really, this group here is such a great model for so many different things. We talk, we think, we consider, we listen to each other, we get into the weeds, we pull back, we look at big pictures. And the council doesn't always get to do that. And when they're talking about their own salaries, it's almost impossible for them to do that. And so having another body be able to do that, make a recommendation. If the council feels the politics are too hot, they don't want to get near it anyways, even though they have it, they can step away. They can refuse to exercise that authority. And if you want to put a mechanism into, you know, to further restrict it, say require a 4/5 supermajority or whatever we end up the total number, then, you know, they really all have to agree that it's necessary. And they've got an independent commission that has gone and done the work and had good conversations like we're having here, you know. And then it becomes a more feasible decision for them to make. And if the budget's out of whack at that time, you know, people can stand up at the meeting and say, how dare you? I don't care what the commission said. And it doesn't change the ability to hold them accountable in those circumstances. But it allows them in a, you know, perhaps less volatile circumstance, make a decision with some backstop of support from an independent body.
I have a question or a comment and question. So one, is there to, again, the points raised about the additional cost, but knowing that we also perhaps one path forward to solve the problem is to look at an outside commission. Well, the city has multiple commissions, and I wonder if our recommendation includes, for example, is there a commission where it fits every 5 years? Is it civil service? Is it audit? Is it finance? Is it, I mean, so we can table that piece perhaps, and where my question's going is, are there other criteria we might recommend to council?
For a commission or other than a commission?
Well, because we're not set on that, let's say either. Do you know what I mean? I think where I'm getting my impression is that unless you want to take a consensus, I have the impression that we think we need to give more direction. Did I read the room wrong? Because if we need to give more direction, then maybe we go there and there's discussion. But if the group doesn't think we need to go there, then we stop. And
What do you mean by give more direction?
I mean, for example, when I do like, in terms of a process, we would involve state law. If the city, you know.
What does that mean, involve state law?
Well, currently it's based on state law, right?
Correct. So do
Currently-
you mean have the council
So
make
that
the,
would be the foundation. That would be, we would, you know, currently what's written, we would keep that. That would be something I would be for, because many of the cities just use state law on its own. We might pick our other top 3 criteria. That criteria being the employee, the unions, and the median. We might, I mean, we might choose benchmark. I mean, Commissioner Megaderchin gave us a couple of different options where we can go with different themes, where we might say, council, did you consider this? You know, there's state law, and then there's benchmarking, and then there's the CDP. I mean, I wonder if we, at least, I'm curious to know if other people think that it would be well-served to give to our recommendation to include more options than just do nothing or.
Well, if we leave it at state law, if I think I understand this, if we leave it at state law, it currently they could double it to $2,500, whatever that number happens to be. And state law already puts a max of 5% per year. So it really doesn't, so I guess, other than potentially putting a commission to go yes or no on the 5%, or making a recommendation, I mean, if it stays as a general law city, then as part of our charter, then.
It's actually higher than that. It's CPI not to exceed 10%,
It's
I
CPI,
believe.
okay. I just said, I'm not talking off the top of my head. Whichever is greater.
Yeah.
But it's like, there's already a max in state law that benchmarks it. You know, now, if you want to put a lower benchmark in for whatever it is, the average of, not to exceed the average of a union or something like that, but that, it pretty much is the process there, other than a nudge to discuss it.
Can I
Then do
jump
we
in on
think we have
the
it?
union point? The problem I have with that is that can potentially distort your negotiations with your bargaining units.
No, I agree. I was just kind
or
of picking up
give the
the.
appearance of doing so?
Yeah, it could, because then it's like, yeah, you give out raises, because you know you're going to get the same percentage coming forward. That's its own issue.
And that was just I was just throwing in, I'm not set on where we land. I was just trying to take into consideration all the comments made. And so then, to your point, Commissioner Povolitis, it sounds, I mean, to the point that you just outlined with the state law, then I guess where we go is, do we think what's happening is working? I don't know, Chair. Or,
Can I ask everybody to look at the slide on Pasadena? And actually, let's look at the language, because gotta love them. They actually seem to have incorporated a lot of what we're talking about, including what Paul was talking about, and taking into consideration the full scope of compensation. So it establishes a committee. Each council member nominates one person to the committee. I don't know how I feel about that. But, okay, the duties of the committee shall be to study, take public input, make recommendations regarding compensation paid to members, and the benefits to which the members of the city council are entitled, including but not limited to insurance expenses, allowances, and reimbursements. And again, they meet once every 5 years. The council may take no action on the recommendation, or it may by ordinance adjust compensation not to exceed the recommendation of the committee. And any ordinance adopted pursuant to the recommendation shall be adopted by a 2/3 majority and be subject to referendum. So there's a lot of process and accountability, and takes into account of all those, other benefit issues that were discussed earlier, and allows people to do so in a context in which all the information can be brought to bear, not, I'm finding this increasingly attractive. There's also a cap here. I don't know if I was comfortable with that. It says, no increase in the annual compensation shall be, I guess that they can do
annual updates.
Well, I like that it has this two-step once it's been initially established, because we're kind of
Yeah.
hinting that like it's way too low at 17, and then once we get it fixed, then 3 to 5% yearly. But if you just do 3 to 5%, you'll never catch up to.
So they've gotten some degree of index once they've established it, but they allows them every 5 years to recalibrate it based on the recommendation of an independent committee.
Mr. Chair, in terms of process, I will note for the committee that Pasadena's compensation charter provision is 6 paragraphs long. We pulled the operative 2 paragraphs for purposes of this discussion. There's a lot of process in that section of the charter.
I love editing, so I'm fine with cutting out unnecessary parts. But I'm just pointing to this as like, we're not the only people who have been through this. Our neighbors have been through this. They came up with something that touches on all of the issues. Now, whether or not we want to follow the same solution, I just want to point out that they've already thought about this, and they've come up with a process that, to me, encapsulates a lot of what we've been talking about. Alan, please.
Attorney Israel, could you, do you know in Pasadena's charter what does subject to referendum as provided in this charter actually mean?
And Committee Member Durham, you're referring to the paragraph on adoption of the committee's, or the commission's recommendation on second slide?
Yes, 2/3 majority vote and shall be subject to referendum as provided in this charter.
I think what the meaning is that the electorate can countermand the decision of the council.
But it wouldn't automatically go on a ballot.
No.
There'd have to be some
A
sort
petition.
of petition and signature gathering.
That would
Correct.
be an initiative. Yeah.
So that could be a big hurdle for the residents, the voters, potentially.
I think conceivably it could be.
Is it because of the number of signatures are required to get, to call for a referendum?
I'm just assuming it's a pretty high threshold, but I don't know Pasadena's charter, or what's required to have
Let's
a
just assume it's the
successful-
same as state law.
I don't know the answer to that question
I believe
offhand.
it's 10% of registered voters from the last gubernatorial election.
Yeah. And it's hard to get people to sign petitions and referendums.
Glendale has a pretty low turnout, so the 10% of the last voters would not be that many. I would, in looking at this, I would not want the city council to choose this commission. I would want the city manager to put together a commission. I take that from the way that the panel has been hiring or rehiring people for commissions and committees in the city now. And to me, it seems a lot of, you do this for me, I'll do that for you. And I want to avoid that.
What if we put the treasurer on there as a chair?
Good idea.
And then, because I hate to put a city manager in that position of picking the entire commission. I'm sorry. I don't even want to speak.
Thanks.
Haven't heard much from her this evening.
It's been a really interesting discussion, and I wanted to hear everyone's opinion before I spoke. But I'm in between what most of us are saying, it seems like. I think it's important to have a yearly percentage go up in their salary and start at the state because we're extremely low at the moment. And the percentage, it could just be the usual adjustment, 2 to 3% a year, only because otherwise we're going to be staying at the same salary for a potential of 5 years. And after that 5 years, they might say, we're not going to raise it, the committee that we come up with. So in terms of the committee, I think that's also kind of important because maybe the committee decides we need to give council a raise above the traditional 2 to 3% that we've been seeing every year. And just going back to what we saw after COVID and things skyrocketing after that, it wouldn't be fair to cap it at 2 to 3% 5 years later. But if there is a deficit, obviously we wouldn't be raising it. So I think I'm in both sides where there should be an automatic increase yearly, but then in 5 years we should have a committee that decides if they should get a higher increase than usual.
Are there any employees who have an automatic increase indefinitely for the city?
No, not indefinitely.
You get your step.
Right, there's usually a step, and then some contracts will have COLAs, but it's just for, a period of time, not
Length of the
not
contract.
perpetuity. Correct.
Which is usually longer than 4 years.
It varies. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4.
I'm asking the question of, people who run for city office, for council, have no problem making the case for a matter that they feel really strongly for. That's what they do. They have no problem doing that on council. They have no problem doing that when they're running, whether first time or reelection.
The people who currently run for council.
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
Part of the discussion this evening has been the low salaries is one of the factors that keeps people from running in the first place. So the people who are self-selecting to run are people who can afford to do the job, notwithstanding the pay.
So if the argument that I think you're making is, should the level of compensation, total compensation, base salary, and all the other benefits equal a full-time job, if that's which would then make someone decide, I'm going to stop working, or I'm going to take time off and I'm going to run for council. Is that what?
That's not the argument I'm making. I was articulating an argument that has been made. The argument that I'm making is that the question is probably best settled by a committee whose time and efforts can be devoted to that question.
So again, getting back to my point, which was that council people running for office have no problem articulating their support for or against an idea that they think has merit.
They do when articulating their actual position they know will not be politically popular.
So we're trying to shield council members from
No.
making a political decision?
I wouldn't characterize it as a shield. I would characterize it as there is a political problem, and that is something that charters and constitutions should try to address.
And what's the problem?
The problem is that it's politically unpalatable for councils to be voting directly without any sort of process to it on their own salaries.
I mean, I don't think it's unpalatable. It's unpalatable if your case is weak.
I think the majority of people who show up and comment at city council meetings would have a field day with it.
But
regardless of the merits.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we need to, at least I assume that arguments win based on their merits at the end of the day. That's just sort of a rule of law, for me, at least.
But they don't.
And I just think it would be a rare scenario for someone who can't afford to run for city council, run to city council, to then immediately bring up this position. By the way, I need a pay increase quick because I'm a teacher and I can't afford to do this. So yeah, and whether it's part-time, full-time, I also think it's funny as people go around and have such demands of city council and what they should be experts on everything. It's funny when you think of them as volunteers, to be like, hey, ease up on them. They're volunteers.
It's like the PTA.
Exactly.
Annie?
Just to bring an example, and I'm pretty sure it's not just me, but any public employee, even our salaries are judged by the public. Any raises we get are judged by the public, and they really think we shouldn't be getting raises because we work for the public, and they pay for our salaries, basically, is what I've heard so many times. So if, as public employees, we have that message already sent to us, it would be really weird for an elected official to say, hey, listen, I want to raise my salary.
I think what Commissioner Paul is trying to say is that their position already entails a lot of tough subjects. And everything is political. I mean, this is policy. I don't want to say political, and political doesn't mean only negative. I think a lot of people think when you are into politics, it's negative. It's about different types of policies, great, things that people agree with, people do not agree with. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a negative thing. And I can see how this is kind of tied to negativity, but again, I think what I agree about is if you offer something or to talk about something that there are merits like any other issue, then does it really entail another group of people deciding what it needs to be if there is a law that can allow them to do it? And I think everything they do, whether they make money for it or not, it is political, it's tough, and these people who usually are in that position are capable of talking about these issues and raising. There may be a little more sensitivity, but it can be about so many different subjects and ideas that they will be talking about. So in that regards, I think the job is already tough. Everything they talk about, whether it's housing, parks, everything is already tough. So I kind of agree about it. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Carl?
So I'm just going to add a couple of things to enhance the quagmire. Because I think it ultimately comes down to whether, ultimately the council's got to make the decision, even if it goes through a commission, but that does give them somebody to look at it. It's kind of like this. Someone could look at this and go, why, is staff sitting here in an evening, doing this to review a charter? But a charter for a city is kind of its important governing document, and to review it every so often is worthwhile. Council members are, if you will, our board of directors for the city. So reviewing their compensation and having somebody, even if it's quasi-independent, because I don't know how to get the political part of it completely out. It's not perfect, but to do that. But ultimately, council still has to make a decision as to whether they do it, and they're going to have to make the case to the people. The committee might help them make the case or not make the case. I don't know. This could be DOA in a year with fiscal issues on there. But I think your point's well taken, that one of the things that I think the committee would need to consider is the fiscal health of the city when it makes a recommendation as to what the salary should be. But I'm also trying to go back going, I don't want to look at it with this particular council or this particular budget, because there will be years in which we go through some, and have gone through some really, really tough times in Glendale. And there are other times when things are a little bit better. And you need to be able to adjust for both. And so I'm really trying to go out and go, what does it look like just today? It's like, this document should serve us well into the future. So that process needs to work for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or in perpetuity. So whatever we put out here should work in a bad budget year, it should work in a good budget year, and it's going to trust the people that are there to a certain extent to go, this is what we should do. Said, my biases, I think council should be part-time, and I'm still altruistic that people going there should be doing that. That might change over time. I won't be sitting here maybe when that changes. But the next group behind us, if we lay in the groundwork, then at least the process is there. But then I said, council's still got to look at their budgets, council's still got to look in the mirror, and council still has to go out and go, okay, we're approving this. And the other referendum might ultimately be, if you approve the pay raise as proposed, whether or not people are upset enough to say you're not there. I do like the Pasadena part about referendum. Like, it might take a while, but if you've done something that is, shall we say, fiscally irresponsible, and people look at that and go, hey, this is way out of line, then they have the ability to go run a petition and go, you know what, we're rolling that back. I am slowly warming to the model, but I guess ultimately we got to come down to, are we do we want a commission, do we not, or do we want to kind of leave it as is?
And I just, thank you, Carl. I think we have an obligation to come to some sort of consensus, even if we don't all agree. Our obligation is to not reach unanimity, but to make a recommendation, concrete recommendations on these issues. So,
Chair Flower, so in the in the interest of just moving this forward in terms of discussion, so if we could do one of two things could be proposed. We could go with what it currently is. We could consider that we're the commission and we're the advisory committee. And our advice is to, again, going back to page 5, on the notes we were given, to use the schedule and procedure for adjustment, and to, if the current council member salary is $14.30 per month, and they've not adjusted salary since 2013, we could make an adjustment utilizing the above procedure, the schedule and the procedure, and that it would be effective, I believe, it wouldn't be effective 2024. This was obviously before, it would be
Right.
2026,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or we could even put it, can we put it out to 2028 if we
Could,
are
but
taking into consideration the
Again, I
health of
think
the
to
city?
Chair Flower's point, if you're going to keep the certain current process, then you can certainly make recommendations, but the recommendation would be to make no change to the charter. And let-
And
let
that's
and
the
let-
chart.
and
No
let-
change to the.
Our jurisdiction is charter recommendations, and if the proposal is to not change what's currently there, that's the end of it. And if you want to independently make a recommendation to say, I think you should go ahead and put that forward, that's fine.
Then
And I think that'd be
secondly,
presumed, right? If
Yeah.
your
Yeah, then-
recommendation is to keep it the same, it's presumed that you're suggesting council consider making that
All right.
adjustment.
Consider
on that.
following.
okay, I'll be more concise. We have two things before us. We can keep it the same, or we can come back next month and further study Pasadena. That's a suggestion, just to move us to a vote.
I appreciate you narrowing it down and giving us concrete terms.
I'm only trying to do it to move it to a motion.
Yeah.
But again, it's whatever the.
Would anybody
commission
mind if I
does.
just take a quick straw poll on a couple of questions just to see where we're at? Is there anybody who's leaning towards just keeping the status quo, which is defaults to state law? Okay. Are there people who would like to consider creation of a committee as a part of a charter recommendation? Okay. Are there people who would just rather that it be a set index every year? Okay. Or perhaps a combination of things? Yeah, I see that too. Okay.
I'd like one modification, keep the current charter unchanged with the modification that council be required to bring up the matter and deliberate it every 5 years.
Okay, that would be a different option.
That'd be basically keeping the same, but an amendment to just make that one addition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's
Right.
an affirmative obligation that they
Okay, but with
deliberate.
no separate body, just, it
Correct,
requires
yeah.
them to call the question at least once every
That's
5
right.
years.
That's right,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And no health of the city language included?
Well, that should be baked into their deliberation. I mean, for them to deliberate without considering the health of the city, then it's like malpractice as far as I'm concerned.
Or the benchmark.
And I something to the city. So, can you do some research about, is there any city that has ordinance like Paul proposed, and actually whether the city council take up on that 5-year, mandatory discussion and took some action? Can you get some?
We can certainly, if
Yeah.
that's the thing, but I would note that.
And the reason why
They've canvassed the other
The reason
cities
why I
pretty well.
suggest that is because I think that gives them some of the political cover that you're looking for,
I
Chair
agree.
Flower.
I agree, because
And-
it says they have to
We-
consider the
look,
question.
we're
Like, We
obligated-
didn't want to do this, but
Yeah,
the
that's
people
right.
told us we
That's
have to
right.
consider the question.
That's right, and it helps eliminate the need for an additional body, which I think is prone to all kinds of issues. And the last thing I'd say, my issue with the Pasadena option, hearing that it's 6 paragraphs, my hunch is that it's far too prescriptive, and there's no way that you can be that prescriptive and account for all the variabilities of something like this.
I'm not suggesting we follow the verbiage.
No, I'm just in
directly.
concept,
Yeah.
of a very prescriptive process of something like this nature. I think it's best to leave it the way it is, but just require, because the issue we're having is that they don't have the political cover, using your phrase, to bring up this matter and discuss it. Well, we will give them that cover by saying you must discuss it every 5 years and make a decision. And if your decision is that you need to increase your salary when the city is in a fiscal deficit or projected, have at it. And if your decision is to actually symbolically reduce your salary, have at that. But you can't have your cake and eat it too, and try to push it off to another body and not have political cover when you have the ability to discuss it right now if you want to.
Can I just say something? I think the reason that I personally am looking for another body is because of, still there's a bias in the discussion, regardless of the political repercussions or not, because that's going to directly affect the person that is deciding for themselves. So it's not just the political part, which I see your point, but I think that for me to sit and decide for my own salary, I'm still going to be
But it's not,
thinking-
because it's deferred, which is what we established, doesn't take into effect until later. Now, you may politically run into an issue where they can say you voted for an increase and therefore everybody should pile on against you, but that's, comes with the territory.
I get it, but I think that the city council members are not only looking for 2-year terms. I mean, or even 4 years. They really have, so far.
Then they
they've
should
had
live with the
this.
consequences of whatever they decide.
Okay, that's,
I mean,
I
it's
just
simple.
wanted to, sure.
Again. I get the sense that there is a fair bit of support for the idea of a committee concept, whether or not that has majority support, not clear what that might look like. We have a base model of.
Well, I'd like to make a motion if I could.
Can I, do you mind if I finish the thought? What I'm thinking is it would be nice to, if we could make use of this professional staff. Do you think you could pare down the Pasadena concept to less than 6 paragraphs and incorporating some of the things we've talked about here? I mean, like appointed body. I love the language about considering the full scope of their compensation, but I don't know what else is in those other 6 paragraphs. But the idea that they still have to pass an ordinance, that there is a supermajority requirement, that it is subject to referendum. I think those are all good concepts, and if perhaps they could be drafted a little more clearly.
And sorry, maybe I missed this. Is there not the result of what the committee recommended at Pasadena?
We don't have that information. We're following on the committee's request to bring back sample language from the similarly situated cities.
My hesitation about going down that rabbit hole is then, again, we're focusing on
if it was
less about
resourceful
the
or not.
process than whether or not they made a good decision.
Fair enough.
Which
Yeah,
I like Carl's point. It's going to be somebody else's decision.
I don't think that they've, and I don't think they've taken any action yet, that committee. They've started their process but haven't done anything yet. We can certainly bring back, we use what's in the slide as the basis and then go look at Pasadena's ordinance again and figure out, is there anything in there that should also be in here that's not critical, that's critical to sort of implement this piece of it, and leave out whatever might be extraneous.
Sure.
If that ultimately is where you're going. And we could certainly, I mean, it's ultimately up to the committee how to direct us today, but we can bring back that, maybe some other, we'll again look at the other options.
Yeah, if we could have something more concrete.
Yeah.
And,
We'll do that.
an advisory model based on that, language that takes on Paul's idea of just adding that 5-year, mandatory question. And is there anything else that people would like to see articulated in writing for us to directly consider, and with the goal of voting? Voting on something as a recommendation.
I still would not like the city council to pick, if we do go a committee, we could do the director of finance, different routes we could take.
Okay.
We'll bring back some options on that, Committee Member Meek. I would just note what transpired. I know you're referring to what transpired with all the board and commission replacements. I would note that was just a rather unique set of circumstances, because the council changed its mind a couple of times.
Yes.
And so I no doubt was clunky. I would ask you to keep an open mind when we maybe suggest that the council is the body that recommend the members to that committee. But we'll bring back some options on that as well. It's just I'm asking you not to use what happened with the board and commission process to necessarily guide your thoughts on that 100%.
For both options, just because, as I said, you have various compensations, can we maybe have some language that puts a little transparency into what the full package looks like? It's both salary and benefits. Kind of like Pasadena says, it's
So
the
the
full compensation package, but I think
The
whether
recommend-
council takes it up or whether we go to the committee, it would be nice to know what exactly, because it's like going, okay, we increased the salary, but, you know, there's a
So the
car allowance on the side.
The recommendation from the advisory body to the council shall include the full scope of compensation, including but not limited to.
And I think even with Paul's, I'd throw that in there, that it's like if council brings it up, that it's got to be a full discussion of
You got it.
the compensation package. But I'll have you fired before you know it.
So the other challenge is we probably would need to, I feel for the staff because there's not a lot of time to put this together, get it to us in time to review. As it is, we received this information 3 days before the meeting. So with the holidays coming, I just want to be sensitive to staff's time and being able to get it to us in time and all that.
That said, a bit more time to review the packet would be great. I know that's a constant complaint, but I've been on the other side. Are there any objections to that direction to the staff? Okay, I think you have the direction.
But,
Oh.
Chair, no, not on that point, but to the point raised about the next time we get together, that is the 4th of July, so.
We understand, we have an item where we're discussing about future
Perfect.
agendas. We want to go through that as well.
I can't think of
We
any
do not
better
want
way
to
to
be here on July
celebrate the
3rd.
country than to participate in democratic self-governance like this. I'll see you here. No?
With fireworks?
Oh, I guess I'll be by myself.
You tell us, chief.
All right. I want to thank every single one of you. This was a really good discussion, in my opinion. Everybody had a lot to bring to the discussion. Like I said, I started off this conversation, I didn't think I had any strong feelings, but you all made good points all around that I had to really think about it, and I appreciate it. Thank you. All right.
Do we take public comment on this, or no?
We did. It's
Oh,
been
at
a
the
long
beginning?
time, but we did. Yeah, so we are now, the mysterious item 7, reports dash information. Okay. Item 8, future agendas. Let's talk about the 4th and beyond.
Right, so the next regular scheduled meeting, which is obviously the first Thursday of the month, is July 3rd. We're obviously not recommending not having that meeting because July 4th is the next day. We don't have a set date yet. We could go with July 10th if the committee is available, or if not, then we will we will have, again, Greg send out a request for potential dates, but it would be, I think, beneficial to try to get a meeting for July, not skip the month. And so certainly we can deal with this issue as well.
I know I have a conflict on the 10th.
If we are going to skip a month, this July would be the month to skip, in
Certainly.
general. That's my, but the first half of the month tends to be pretty busy for everybody.
We were asked previously just to kind of hold Thursdays. I don't know if,
I think a poll's probably best, but
Okay.
if my inclination is to skip July, just because of, we've been going at it, and there's a lot we may need to
We
just.
could circle, and that would certainly give time for staff to circle back not only on this item, but some of the other items
Exactly.
we've discussed and
Yes.
get ready for the.
Can the next agenda then, if we're going to, especially if we're going to skip July, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong month. You said July 10th.
You're
That
busy.
actually does work for me, sorry.
Okay.
Now that I've said I don't have a conflict.
Well, we can send out a poll for the 10th,
Okay.
and then if that doesn't work, we can certainly just schedule the next meeting for August 7th.
Okay. But if we do go that long without a meeting, can we also bring back the district question?
We will.
And if we have 2 months, if we could have at least a week with the agenda, that would be great.
We will.
In Chair Flower, bringing back the district question is just bringing it back as a vote, right?
Yes,
We're not
because-
reopening up discussion?
Yes, because we had a vote with only 10 of us here and we deadlocked. And so my hope was if we all come back to consider it again, if we deadlock again, we deadlock again.
and there's no recommendation. But hopefully, we can break a deadlock on that question.
And one follow-up to that, if I may. So if we vote on that in August and we send recommendations back to council, whenever that may, August, September, does that allow council enough time for discussion for it to go on the ballot?
It would.
Okay,
yes.
great.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Alan?
Is the second vote on districts, since there were 10 of us here the first time, are there supposed to be all of us here on the second vote, or just whoever shows up?
The point was to come back and to hopefully have everybody here for that vote. That is my sincerest desire.
But is that
Because-
going to be a prerequisite for the second vote, that everybody's in attendance?
I hesitate to say yes, because I don't know if I unilaterally have that authority. Right now, we've taken no action, so we can come back and take no action as many times as we want. But I would hope that I would not be in favor of holding a vote on that question of all questions if we have less than 12 members here.
Good, yeah, I think that would be good.
I would.
I'm not trying to push this so that we could get a different result. I'm honestly just want to make sure that on this question, some of the other questions we decide, if you're not here, I'm sorry, we're going to move on. But this question is the one that I think occupies us the most and has occupied the council the most. And I think, especially since we deadlocked, we should get everybody to vote on this.
Do you know why it wasn't on the agenda this evening? I mean, because Greg sent out asking if we were all going to be here. Maybe it wasn't
For
clear.
some reason, people thought I wasn't going to be here.
Yeah, we didn't realize we were going to have a full committee today.
Nobody
Otherwise,
told
we
me
would
I
have
wasn't supposed to be here, though, so I came. All right.
Can we do a straw poll to see if we can have a meeting in July?
On July 10th?
Yeah?
Yeah, right now, is there anybody here who knows they have a conflict on July 10th? And I'll double check since I
If we
got it
could,
wrong.
I'd rather just circulate something just so that we're not publicly sharing whether we're in town or not in town.
So you'd like to take, we could do the poll, yeah. We just to see about availability.
All right. Item 9, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Carl, second from Stephen. All in favor? Aye. All right. Good night, folks.
Thank you.